Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the monthly webinar series here at the Asia Society Korea. I am Mason Richey, as some of you know, from Hankuk University of Foreign Studies here in Seoul, Korea. I'm also a senior contributor here at the Asia Society Korea. And this week, or this month, we're going to be talking about the relations between Korea, both South and North, and Southeast Asia. And to that end, we have two outstanding guests for this month's webinar. In the first place, we have Dr. Hoo Chiew-Ping, who is a senior lecturer in strategic studies and international relations at the National University of Malaysia. She is also a council fellow at the Global Future Council on the Korean Peninsula at the World Economic Forum. She also lectures at the Malaysian Armed Forces Defense College in the Institute of Diplomacy and Foreign Relations of Malaysia. Her research work is on the Korean Peninsula, notably security issues, but also security and economic linkages between Northeast Asia in general and Southeast Asia, as well as the influence of external powers such as the US, China, Japan, Australia, in Southeast Asia. She received her PhD in politics and international relations from La Trobe University in Australia. We also have with us today, I'm privileged to say, Dr. Jaehyon, who is senior fellow in the ASEAN and Oceania Studies Center at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Previously, Dr. Lee was a research fellow at the Korean Institute of Southeast Asian Studies. He was a visiting professor at the Institute of Foreign Affairs and National Security at the Korean National Diplomatic Academy. His research also focuses on Southeast Asian politics and international relations, East Asia regional cooperation, and non-traditional and human security issues, which is, of course, extremely important right now in this time of COVID, obviously. Dr. Lee received his PhD in politics from Murdoch University, also in Australia. So we have a very strong Australia presence here today. I'm sure that both of our guests will make the higher education system there look as good as its reputation is. So thanks to both of our outstanding guests today. I'm extremely happy to have them and lucky that they were able to take time out of their schedules to join us. So I'm going to get straight into a few questions, some of which are relatively basic, and then I think we'll maybe move on to a few things that are perhaps a bit more complex or perhaps even a bit more controversial in some cases. And so I'm going to start off with a pretty simple question. I guess maybe we'll start with Dr. Hoo. What is the importance strategically and or economically of Southeast Asia for South Korea?
Thank you so much, Mason, Richey, and also Asia Society of Korea having us here. So on this first question, I think South Korea has become ever more important for Southeast Asia because this region has long been a region of investment destination and also infrastructure development of Japan. And China is actually a relatively newcomer. So South Korea's presence is not as new as many may have perceived it to be. So after following Japan's overseas development assistance model, Korea has already established its presence in Southeast Asia for quite a long time. So what makes it so significant right now with the introductions of new Southern policy is that South Korea is laying its foundation as a middle power. And the significance here is also because the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, so it serves as the middle power platform, engaging many other major powers, including the United States, China, Japan, South Korea, Russia, Australia, and the wider region. So given how the allegedly old Southern policy occurred during Chun Doo-hwan's government when he visited several Southeast Asian countries during the early years of his time in power. It was unfortunately halted by the infamous Rangoon bombing by the North Korean agent in Burma in 1983. So unfortunately, that forced South Korea's attention back to North Korea instead of engaging Southeast Asian region more widely and proactively. So since then, Kim Yong-sam administration until Park Geun-hye administration, we have seen various initiatives launched by South Korean government that further institutionalize their presence in Southeast Asia, and Moon Jae-in administration's New Southern Policy is the one that cemented this institutionalization of a strategic partnership.
Super. I think it's really interesting that you bring up the bombing in Rangoon. Obviously there's a longer history between the two Koreas in Southeast Asia than we tend to think. I guess we tend to think of it, through the New Southern Policy, which we'll come to in just a second, and through multilateral engagement of South Korea and also North Korea in the Southeast Asia region. But of course, things go back much farther than that. And of course, also one of the important milestones in the development of the relationship between South Korea and the U.S. was South Korea's participation in the Vietnam War. And that's something I think that these days not as many people think about as probably they should. So that was obviously a very comprehensive answer, and in that sense, maybe I'll sort of turn to the other side of the coin, and ask Dr. Lee then, since we've heard this concept of the New Southern Policy be evoked in our first answer. Maybe Dr. Lee, you can maybe describe for us a little bit what this New Southern Policy is. Perhaps you can judge its progress a little bit. Moon's entering his last full year here. So maybe you can give us a state of play or an update or an evaluation of how the New Southern Policy is progressing.
Okay. First of all, thank you for having me today. And I believe Chiew-Ping got the great point explaining the Korea Southeast Asian relations from a historical perspective. In her answer, there was a mention that the South Korea's approach policy toward Southeast Asian countries was kind of up and down over the few administrations. And the point that the New Southern Policy is making is that the South Korea's policy from now on toward the ASEAN country will be stable, will be consistent and persistent. That's the main point of a New Southern Policy. Basically, the New Southern Policy is the purpose is to deepen and widen the bilateral relations with Southeast Asian countries, and it revealed so-called three P's: peace, prosperity, and people as the main principle of this policy. The background of this policy is that the South Korea long has been too much dependent on four major powers surrounding Korean Peninsula. That's China, US, Russia, and Japan. It's understandable because the biggest security threat for South Korea is the North Korea and the Korean Peninsula situation. To manage the Korean Peninsula situation, we needed to have good relations with these four powers. But as Chiew-Ping mentioned, South Korea's economies got bigger, and our prestige in the global stage is higher than before. And then South Korea has to make a better contribution for the global community and regional community. And the New Southern Policy is so that based on that, South Korea has to build its own strategic and economic network beyond the four major powers. So that is the kind of a background of New Southern Policy. And so far, in the past 3 years, the Moon Jae-in administration has made a great effort. One of the most impressive achievement of the New Southern Policy is that it laid kind of a solid base for the bilateral relations between Korea and Southeast Asian countries. In the past administration, the president or the government announced this and that policy toward Southeast Asia, but something happens in the Korean Peninsula, for example, in a provocation by North Korea, then everyone forgets Southeast Asia. and they just focus on the Korean Peninsula situation, and that's it. But New Southern policy tried to reverse that kind of tradition in South Korea, and I believe the Moon Jae-in government has done the job quite well. And so I think the kind of institutional base for sustainable policy towards Southeast Asia is laid. But of course, every policy has its own shortcomings or the weakness. First of all, New Southern policy did not produce any kind of a flagship project or outcome or consequence that you can identify with New Southern policy with kind of impressive numbers or visible, symbols or whatever. And the second kind of limit is the multilateral component of the New Southern policy. Of course, the ASEAN is the center of major regional multilateral cooperation, but the New Southern policy too much focused on bilateral relations, and the policy forgot multilateral component. And the last one is that the balance issue, regional and issue balance. What I mean by regional balance is that the New Southern policy has got two components. One, Southeast Asia, and the other is India. Based on the existing bilateral relations with the Southeast Asian countries, our cooperation with ASEAN under the banner of a New Southern policy is going very well. But on the other hand, the bilateral relations with India is still there. So there is a regional imbalance. And at the same time, there is an issue imbalance. As I mentioned, the New Southern policy has got three different pillars: peace, prosperity, and people. The people stand for social cultural cooperation, prosperity stands for economic cooperation. These two areas made great progress during the Moon Jae-in administration. But in terms of peace cooperation, political security cooperation, it hasn't really made big progress. These three are the kind of a limit of New Southern policy so far.
Okay, wow, there's a lot to unpack there. Both of your first sets of answers have been extremely comprehensive, and there's a lot to unpack there. If I can just, I was making a few notes to myself. If I can make one or two observations and then follow up with a few questions that sort of came out of your answers. I think it's not only South Korea that struggles to cooperate with India. India is a complex partner. It's a very large country. It has a very peculiar relationship with with the U.S. and with China and with Australia. The Quad mechanism has obviously complicated the situation in the region as well. So it's not a huge surprise, I think, to me that South Korea, might be having some difficulty working together with India, simply because, for such a large and important country, India's foreign policy bandwidth is actually comparatively small. I remember talking to a former Indian ambassador here who told me, with respect to a number of cooperation projects in the region, he said, we have more than 1 billion people, but our Ministry of Foreign Affairs staff is roughly the size of New Zealand, right? So they just simply have some bandwidth issues on how much, how much throughput they can do on these types of projects. But that's an important observation, that the New Southern policy isn't just about Southeast Asia. It's also about South Asia, including India. On the peace part of the PPP, the people, prosperity, and peace, I want to come back to that. Obviously the South China Sea issue with China is an issue, of course, where both ASEAN and South Korea have some skepticism with respect to how the international community, notably perhaps the US and Japan, would like to deal with that situation because of the relationship that both South Korea and ASEAN states have with China. Um, and obviously, we can come back and talk about that if you want. The other thing, of course, which I would like to come back to perhaps at the end briefly, is the situation in Myanmar, whether that be with respect to the Rohingya or whether that be with respect to what we've seen happen most recently with the coup. So obviously, the peace-related issue, I think, is an important one that probably hasn't gotten enough attention here in South Korea. If I could sort of then bring up three questions that sort of came out of your answers. The first one would be coming to the question of people and perhaps also in a way prosperity. How has COVID affected the New Southern Policy and the relationship between the Koreas and Southeast Asia? Someone smarter than me, when I was having dinner a couple of nights ago, said that he wondered if the travel restrictions hurt some of the New Southern Policy, both in terms of sociocultural exchange, but also even in terms of business, where perhaps business people didn't have as many opportunities to go do site visits, and to build those links or to continue building out links with economic partners there. So I'm just wondering how COVID maybe has affected the New Southern Policy. You mentioned, Dr. Lee, that there isn't a big, showcase project that's come out of the New Southern Policy. Perhaps either of you could talk about maybe some of the lesser known projects, maybe one or two that are perhaps not noticeable, but are symbolic or perhaps have some type of future importance. And then thirdly, I think it's interesting that you both mentioned that Southeast Asia seems to Southeast Asian nations do see the New Southern Policy as building a sort of stable foundation for cooperation with South Korea going forward. One of the things that I tend to hear from representatives of other countries, diplomats, political leaders, people in think tanks, is that when they deal with South Korea, they frequently end up being frustrated at the fact that South Korea so frequently ends up coming back to an inter-Korean focus. And it ends up detracting from these larger projects that South Korea would like to do to be more globally relevant. Do you either of you get the sense that that's also the case in Southeast Asia, that they appreciate the concept, they appreciate the commitment to it, but they wish that at the end of the day, things for South Korea didn't always end up somehow coming back to relations between the South and the North? So those are my three questions. I know they're kind of complex and this might take a while, but do your best to be efficient.
Yeah, so I think we may want to start with the third question that you just raised. Yeah. So I think there is definitely a gap among the perceptions about how important is ASEAN and Southeast Asia, and maybe to a certain extent India, in South Korea's foreign policy figuration. So Kim Jong-un administration promoted the internationalization of Korea, so which is Segeho of South Korea's foreign policy outreach. And then we also have Park Geun-hye's Northeast Asian Peace Cooperation Initiative. So, and NAPC actually in a way was looking at European Union, EU, and ASEAN as the regional cooperation model that South Korea can emulate and therefore be able to express their middle power position more effectively. And Roh Moo-hyun government before also tried to play a kind of a balancer role in this Northeast Asia, so on the Korean Peninsula. So all this aspiration has been quite obvious and vocal for Korea watchers. So this type of intention has been repackaged under Moon Jae-in's government and become more of the trying to posit a middle position between China and the United States. So because of this emerging US-China strategic rivalry, not only in East Asia, but also in the wider global stage. So in that sense, I think I agree with Professor Jeffrey Robertson, another Australian. So he argued that what used to be a taboo about South Koreans cannot afford to not to choose the United States, they increasingly trying to posit the position that they can afford not to choose side. So in a recent online webinar that I moderated with Professor David Kang of University of Southern California, so it was provocatively titled along the lines of why South Korea and any other countries don't want to choose sides between China and the United States. Yeah. So taking Southeast Asian countries, for example, we are made up of smaller, middle-sized countries, and actually being able to not to choose among the great powers is a kind of a luxury afforded by the fact that we are part of this middle power grouping called ASEAN. So South Korea wants to have that luxury. So the best way to achieve this option is via strategic cooperation with ASEAN and also India. And the talk of Quad security alignment among the US-led allies have been on the rise. So tomorrow, Secretary Blinken will meet with the Quad foreign minister. So again, there is another, so the notch of talking of having like-minded states is on the rise right now. But this would put countries like ASEAN, Southeast Asian countries, and South Korea in a very difficult position, because to be inclusive is what we have trying to highlight it in international cooperation, and by grouping countries with the like-minded level and the not so like-minded brands, it seems to be risky. So to manage this risk, there is even more rationale for South Korea to align closer with ASEAN. So what Jaehyon has mentioned about the three main P pillars that actually correspond with ASEAN's social cultural community, political security community, and also economic community. So in these three main domain of cooperation, we are trying to propose a kind of a middle position and trying to converge the common interest rather than highlighting contrast or having confrontation.
Super.
Okay.
Dr. Lee, please go ahead.
You just raised the three questions. First, the impact of COVID on the New Zealand policy implementation, and the second one is what's the Korean project toward Southeast Asia, and the third one is why South Korea has been so much preoccupied with the Korean Peninsula situation, with its relation with other countries. Let me first answer the first question, COVID-19. Of course, it has a big impact on the Korea's implementation of New Zealand policy, because the borders are virtually closed. The diplomats, Korean diplomats, if they want to make a trip to Southeast Asian countries, they have to go through the quarantine 14 days when they got back to South Korea. And it's so it kind of blocked people flow between Korea and Southeast Asia, not just the tourists, not just the civilian, but the government officers as well. So it had huge negative impact on the New Zealand policy implementation. So the government, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, cannot spend its budget for the New Zealand policy. It's a big headache. But if we can reduce the impact of COVID-19, of course, the Korean government is determined to restart New Zealand policy. And the project, under New Zealand policy, there are many small projects, but I would like to highlight we are serious with the smart city project in Southeast Asia. And South Korea has got strengths in the ICT area, and it provides some kind of it gives some merit to Korea in building smart cities in Southeast Asia, of course. And we have a technology of construction and engineering which can be applied to building the cities in and Southeast Asian countries. And also South Korea has been done cooperation with less developed countries in Southeast Asia in the area of pandemic control, pandemic detection, and so on. And in the post-COVID-19 situation, we will put more money and energy into those areas of health and pandemic cooperation. But basically, South Korea has small pocket, if you understand what I mean, compared to China and Japan.
Yeah.
You can't do anything about it. Our size of economy is much smaller than Japan, China, or the US. So obviously there is a limit that we can spend in for the Southeast Asian front. So what South Korea has to do is to identify the area or field that South Korea can do well and concentrate on in that area. And third one, the preoccupation with the peninsula situation. You have to read the mind of the Korean people who were socialized in 60s and 70s or 80s, when South Korea was a kind of developing country. As a developing country, a weak developing country in the 60s, 70s, obviously the most important security and foreign policy issue was the Korean Peninsula, North Korea. And those people who are socialized in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they are in the position of decision-making in South Korea. When you are in 20s, you socialize in that way. Okay, the most important thing for South Korea is the Korean Peninsula, North Korea threat. It lasts forever. It lasts the whole their life. And those people in 60s, 70s, and in the position of decision-making in South Korea, still they are so much preoccupied. The Korean society in general, in their 60s and 70s, so much preoccupied with the Korean Peninsula. So from A to G, it's Korean Peninsula. So the biggest task for Korean foreign policy in the 70s and 80s, and still, given that the people in the decision-making were socialized in the 60s and 70s and 80s. The biggest thing for Korean foreign policy is to secure support for South Korea's position in the Korean Peninsula issue. And now, you can say that South Korea is a kind of a middle power in the post 2010 or something. It's been just 15 or 10 years that South Korea claimed itself as a middle power. We are still in the learning curve. If the people, Korean people in their 40s, 30s, 40s, or early 50s, if these people get to the decision-making position in the government or society, then the situation could be different. We can be freer from this preoccupation with the Korean Peninsula.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Dr. Hu, anything you want to add to that, or?
Oh yeah, I wanted to respond to several points that Jaehyon has just raised. So first of all, is the this preoccupation about North Korea. I think it is inevitable. It is you're just living just right across North Korea. Both of you are occupants of Korean Peninsula, and South Korea is very certain that they should be the main driver of the peace process on the Korean Peninsula. So in my opinion, what New Southern policy can do with its peace pillar is to invite the Southeast Asian countries and also India, of which all of them have diplomatic relations with both North and South Korea. So by having multiple stakeholders involved in the peace process, so in the way South Korea would not feel so alone, and at a time when North Korea would withdraw from inter-Korean engagement, the third party can come to the rescue to provide a neutral platform, such as the case of Singapore Summit and Hanoi Summit. Both of them were held in Southeast Asia. So there are so much space to explore by having an enhanced strategic partnership between ASEAN and South Korea. And I actually look forward for future South Korean administration to make good use of this platform. So secondly is how often I hear from South Koreans speaking of the small pockets compared to Japan and China. So and it is a form of self-constraint as to how much South Korea contributes economically to Southeast Asia and ASEAN. Already, through the New Southern Policy, there is a sub-regional focus on Mekong region. So many people don't know, but South Korea has been involved in Mekong since at least the 90s. And the multiple cooperation framework that we are already seeing in Mekong countries, from Myanmar to Vietnam. So United States, under the Indo-Pacific strategy, has also trying to introduce the new initiative for this region. And already the US aid has contributed so much to these Mekong sub-region countries in managing the environmental issues related to the Mekong River. And China, of course, is the biggest elephant in the room. And China itself has also offered the China-led Mekong Cooperation Framework, such as the Lanchang Mekong Initiative. And Korea, from its New Southern Policy, is offering the elevated platform of Korea-Mekong Summit. So in this vine, we can actually see that South Korea don't have to be too shy about coming out or reaching out to your partners. So in regards to whether your pocket is small, medium-sized, or comparable to Japan and China, I think there is no worry. And this brings back to what Jaehyon has mentioned about the signature project coming from the New Southern Policy. So rightfully, the Smart Cities project between ASEAN and South Korea would be one of the signature. And with the COVID-19, the need for digital infrastructure, engineering assistance, from my understanding, even under the pandemic, Incheon International Airport is still open for international travel. So Malaysia, South Korea have this major purchase from Hyundai or Samsung, heavy industries of the oil and gas exploration vessel. So Malaysian officials are allowed to travel and complying with, of course, the very strict South Korean SOP, and manage to conduct the business, and there is no problem even under the COVID-19. And Indonesia is one of the largest beneficiary of South Korea's public health diplomacy. So we see there is only the deepening of myriads of cooperation between South Korea and ASEAN countries. So more signature progress has already been completed. So not many people know that South Korea was involved in building the bridge that linking both sides of Brunei. So if you look at the map of Brunei, Brunei is separated into two parts of territory within Malaysia. So, and it is very significant that Brunei has direct connection between the two parts of its territory, and it is only possible by sea. And South Korea built that bridge linking two parts of the country. So that to me is also another signature, and to the extent of how much South Korea can contribute in regards to infrastructure development in Southeast Asia, not in competition with China's Belt and Road Initiative or Japan's overseas development assistance, but those niche area, what ASEAN and Korea can focus on and become more, and there will be more and more flagship project coming along.
If I may, can I make some reply to what Chiew-Ping mentioned? Just briefly. You're so kind to the Korea and the New Southern Policy, but this is not to oppose what you just said, but if I clarify a few points. The small pocket issue, I didn't mean that the South Korea really has a small pocket. Oh, we have a small pocket, so we cannot spend. That's not the Korean position. But the small pocket issue I raised is to change the South Korean mind in a way that we used to think that how can we beat China and Southeast Asia? How can we beat Japan and Southeast Asia? The Korean officials and Korean society in general, when they think about our investment, our cooperation with Southeast Asian countries, they regard this as a competition between Korea and Japan and Korea and China. That's wrong. That's a wrong approach. We have to go beyond that. We can just do what we can do. We can just do what we can do better than other countries. We cannot cover every area of cooperation. That was my point. And the second, the role of ASEAN or third parties in the Korean Peninsula. What you just mentioned is exactly the point that I promote as South Korea. Hey, there are other countries like ASEAN or the Australia, New Zealand. They can make a meaningful contribution to manage Korean Peninsula situation, to bring peace to Korea Peninsula. The things I quite often frustrated when I make this kind of argument in South Korea. Hey, Dr. Lee, that sounds nice, but it's so ideal. The Korean Peninsula situation, the North Korean threat is basically things between South Korea and North Korea and the US and China. That's it. If we have more component in the formula, it gets more complicated and it's much more difficult to manage the situation. So for the moment, make it simple. That's the kind of mainstream idea in South Korea. So probably people like me has to make us more voice on the Korean Peninsula issue, that we have to include Southeast Asia and other component in the formula. Exactly, that's my point, but I quite often got frustration.
Well, if I could just jump in real quick, the first thing I want to say is, Dr. Lee, you just detonated a nuclear bomb on my fifth question, which was about South Korea's competitors in Southeast Asia and what South Korea, where they are in that competition. But you don't seem to think that that's a very good model. So I'm going to not ask that question, which is fine because we're starting to run a bit short on time anyway. Thanks also for pointing out some of those projects like the bridge and the river project. I also we saw Dr. Hoo bring up North Korea. I want to come back to North Korea in a minute. I don't want to only talk about South Korea. You talked about some of the projects like the river, for instance. I was in Vientiane some years ago, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, I don't remember. And the river project that was happening on the Mekong was being done by Samsung. And this was of course pre-New Southern Policy. So it's sort of that circles back to your original point, which is that South Korea has been in Southeast Asia for a while. This isn't totally new. If I can just sort of then jump on to sort of two economic related questions, and then we'll come back to North Korea. South Korea and the ASEAN states are signatories to RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, along with China and Australia. What's the value added of RCEP for South Korea and for South Korea-Southeast Asia relations? What are the areas of interest overlap, or alternately, if there are some areas of some friction or divergences, what might those be?
Let me start because I don't have much to say on this economic issues because I don't know much about the economic cooperation. But the interesting point about the RCEP, I believe Chiew-Ping's got more to add, but I believe from the South Korean perspective, the RCEP is the added value when we sign up the RCEP is that the most of the component countries in the RCEP have their own bilateral FTAs, crossing bilateral FTAs, but the Japan does not have FTA with South Korea, and Japan does not have FTA with China. And with this RCEP, the Northeast Asian countries are indirectly linked through the RCEP. So that's the important progress for Korea, Japan, and the Northeast Asian countries. And the benefit of the point of RCEP I have in mind is that most of the regional countries are negatively affected by the COVID-19, and it brought some kind of economic crisis or downturn for the regional countries. With the signing of RCEP and the eventual ratification, I hope the RCEP could be a kind of a springboard for expanding regional trade so that the regional countries can overcome the economic crisis brought by the COVID-19. And I believe the South Korea has got role in that. Together with the ASEAN countries, to find a strategy to overcome the COVID-19 economic crisis through RCEP. That's just my short observation on the RCEP.
Sounds good to me. Dr. Hu?
Thank you. So I agree with what Jaehyon has said. So RCEP is also currently the largest trade pact in the world. So, and the fact that I thank Jaehyon for raising the fact that Japan doesn't have FTA bilaterally with China and South Korea. And this is why ASEAN has always become a very important platform. Since the early 90s, when China began this China-ASEAN cooperation, Japan followed suit, and South Korea, who already established dialogue partnership with ASEAN in 1989, so also joined in the ASEAN regionalization. So it is based upon the ASEAN platform that they are able to participate in a kind of a regionalization. So whether it is in financial cooperation, free trade area, and many other initiatives. So initially, there is a talk of and also misunderstanding that RCEP is a China-initiated trade pact. It's actually proposed by ASEAN. So we can see how the giants can often overshadow the leading initiative actually by a group of smaller countries. So the fact that South Korea and Japan is now, and also China is part of this trade pact, can only mean better prospect for East Asia in general, because after COVID-19, the global supply chain now shifted. The physical lockdown to contain the COVID-19 virus has affected trade and also supply chains. So via many other platforms, not only just RCEP, ASEAN Plus 3 is another important platform that I want to highlight it here, because they serve a very important role since the time of Asian financial crisis in the late 90s. So I would say that pivot to Asia is the right thing to do, and also pivot to Southeast Asia is the right thing to do, because that is where ASEAN lies. And South Korea don't have to worry about competition, because ASEAN often see complementaries among the strategy partners, be it China, Japan, South Korea, United States, and many other countries. So too bad India actually withdraw from RCEP last minute, because to them it's kind of like a negative sum gain. If China gains, then India lost, no matter how much they can gain from this trade pact. So, so in the way, New Southern Policy is trying to bring all this region together, and that would definitely beneficial to South Korea in the long run.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think it's important, for multilateralism today to realize that you can have these positive sum outcomes, and that the negative sum mentality isn't necessarily very fruitful for anyone concerned. I know, by the way, you make an excellent point that RCEP comes out of ASEAN. I mean, talk about ASEAN centrality, right? I mean, you've put together this large trade pact where, you know, South Korea and Japan get a little bit closer together by coming through ASEAN, through an ASEAN project. That's an interesting contribution to make. Just very briefly, Dr. Lee, just a couple of words or a couple of sentences. On the other hand, South Korea is not a part of the CPTPP, the Comprehensive Partnership, on Trade, the CPTPP. I can't remember the acronym.
Comprehensive Progressive. What's that? TPP. Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Trans-Pacific Partnership. There, the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. There we go. Malaysia and Vietnam are a part of it. What is the possibility that South Korea will try to adhere to the CPTPP?
It's very likely that the South Korea seriously think about joining CPTPP. Already the government, the Ministry of Planning and Finance, early this year made an announcement that the Korean government is considering joining CPTPP, and it will start informal discussion with the component countries of CPTPP. So yeah, Korean government is serious about this. But the problem in Korean society and the government in general is that we still haven't gone beyond this widespread myth that the RCEP is Chinese and CPTPP is the US. That's still dominant perception in South Korea. And as just Chiew-Ping mentioned, RCEP is initiated and driven and completed by the ASEAN countries. It's not about China. It's not the China dominant. And the CPTPP at the moment, the US is out of CPTPP, and the value CPTPP can bring to the region is that kind of a higher standard of CPTPP. So if South Korea wants to be really a kind of a regional middle power contributing to the regional order, trade or economic order in the region, then South Korea has got every reason to join CPTPP and promote some areas of CPTPP like labor issues, environment issues, and transparency issues, anti-corruption, which are not in RCEP. We can make a good contribution in those areas. That is good reason for South Korea to join CPTPP.
Tremendous answer. Thanks. So look, we're running short on time. We've got about, I mean, technically we're actually out of time, I think, from what I told you, but you were all kind enough to say that you would be willing to go a little bit over time. So we've got about 5 minutes left, and I want to turn to two states that are, in some sense, embodying a very different approach to relationships multilaterally and with the international community, namely North Korea and Myanmar. I know we don't have much time to deal with it, but yeah, I think it's important. So in the first place, my question would be, North Korea keeps up relations with Southeast Asia. How important is the region for North Korea? And in what way is it important? And sort of what's the state of play right now of North Korea's relationship with Southeast Asian states? And then the second thing I want to turn to is Myanmar, another so-called rogue regime. As everyone knows, the Burmese military has just carried out a coup, seemingly, and it is restoring itself back to full power that it partially surrendered in the agreement in the mid-2010s. What is the position of the Moon administration on Myanmar? I think there was a statement just a day or two ago, but maybe if either of you could give us a bit of an update, both about that situation in general and the South Korean government's position on what is happening in Myanmar now.
let me just start briefly with Myanmar. The Korean, as you mentioned, the Korean government issued a statement that the South Korean government respect the decision made by the Myanmar people in the last election in the November last year, and South Korean government demanded immediate release of Aung San Suu Kyi and other people detained by the military by the Myanmar military. This is unusually strongly worded. The South Korean government not used to make a strong comments on other countries' domestic political situation, but this time is different. But it's just a statement. I'm not quite sure what kind of concrete action the South Korea can take toward the situation in Myanmar. And we have a big dilemma here. New Sudan policy is about Korea-ASEAN relations, and Myanmar is a part of ASEAN. And then we have to deal with the Myanmar under military rule. And it will create kind of a dilemma for New Sudan policy. We can't either, forget about Myanmar, or we can't either cooperate with the Myanmar military. That's the kind of dilemma. Fortunately, most of the meetings and meetings between government in this year as well will be held in online. But we have to seriously think about how to deal with this dilemma. And on North Korea, just briefly, the North Korea is one of the most important security concern for the whole region, along with the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea. And we have to manage this North Korean situation carefully. If there's anything happen in the Korean Peninsula, it not just has an impact on the Northeast Asia or South Korea, but whole Indo-Pacific region. Because as you can see, our experience in the Asian financial crisis, the economic crisis happened in Southeast Asia, infected Northeast Asia from the outside. Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia are not different regions. It's one region. So if something happens in Northeast Asia, it will have a negative impact on FDI and other things, negative impact in Southeast Asia. So we have to put our hands together to build durable peace in the Korean Peninsula. And on the state of play in between Southeast Asia and North Korea, I guess the Chiew-Ping has got the answer.
Thank you. So I agree with what Jaehyon has said about Myanmar. And I think another type of dilemma is that Myanmar is now undergoing this difficult process of democratization. And South Korea historically also have a very tough experience with transitioning from military rule to democracy. So there is some parallel lessons that we can learn, and I'm sure a lot of senior officials in the current South Korean administration can empathize with what is going on in Myanmar. So in terms of North Korea-Southeast Asia relations, the region gained importance in North Korea's strategy when both North and South Korea compete for legitimacy internationally. So they compete for diplomatic recognition, and that is where North Korea reaching out to Southeast Asian countries, so via the overseas mission ambassadors, representative in European countries, in other Southeast Asian countries. Indonesia and Vietnam has the longest sets of relations with North Korea due to the leadership and also party-to-party relations. So during the Cold War, a lot of Southeast Asian countries signed on to the non-aligned movement called NAM, so that prioritize neutrality as our main principle. So the not choosing side position was developed since then. And North Korea actually managed to gain sympathy among the Southeast Asian countries who are anti-imperialist. So South Korea, which has a military alliance with the United States, is seen as the impartial. So North Korea was admitted to non-movement while South Korea is not. So since then, Southeast Asia countries have been supporting North Korea's international organizations membership in related United Nations agency and also other international telegraphic union organizations and many others. So in the post-Cold War era, the famine that occurred in North Korea since mid-1990s also create another type of opportunity for new type of diplomatic relations between North Korea and Southeast Asia. So Malaysia is also one of those countries that send aid and assistance, and our NGO was also in North Korea to provide aid and relief to the North Korean people. So our regional government's personal ties with the North Korean leaders, especially Kim Il-sung, also laid the foundation for many of those bilateral relations that sustain until today. So as you all know, since the Kim Jong-nam assassination in Kuala Lumpur International Airport #2, Malaysia has since suspended bilateral ties. So it's the only Southeast Asian countries that doesn't maintain active diplomatic ties with North Korea. But I'm sure North Korea has the intention to restore these bilateral relations, and Malaysia, if does not take into the long-term consideration of the potential of Korean Peninsula to be part of ASEAN meetings agenda. So highly likely, if future leaders sees the need to produce a kind of a ASEAN united stance on Korean Peninsula peace process, then we will need to overcome this maximum pressure campaign that has been launched since the Trump administration. So that has actually, to a certain extent, affected how close Southeast Asian countries maintain ties with North Korea. So that's all I would like to say.
Well, that's all we can ask for. It's a tremendous answer. Thank you very much. Well, I think we've pretty much bumped up against our time limit here, and you've both already been extremely generous with your time and with your expertise, and we're obviously very thankful for it and grateful to each of you for taking time from your busy schedules. So I'll go ahead and finish with that. Just on behalf of the Asia Society Korea, I want to thank Dr. Jaehyon from the Asan Institute for Policy Studies, and Dr. Chiew-Ping from the National University of Malaysia for joining us today to provide their expertise on Korea looking south and the relations between the two Koreas and Southeast Asia, in particular ASEAN. We covered a lot of ground: economics, security, both hard and soft or non-traditional security issues, diplomacy, history, as well as the current situation. So thank you so much for taking the time and the expertise, and I hope that we'll be able to do this again. So thanks to each of you, and thanks to everyone who has watched this video. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Richey, and also Asia Society of Korea.
Thank you so much.